All right, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Two Beers with a Band. I'm your host, and today I'm sitting in studio with Allan Fine by himself. He doesn't have the guys with the Finites with him. It's just me and him, and I've actually really been looking forward to this interview. I'd like to talk to Allan about upcoming things. He not only is a singer, writer, instrumentalist in the band, he's also a producer, which I think is interesting to be a producer, on top of everything else. It gives you a little bit more of a different look at music. But he is, what are you doing in October?
I'm sober October.
Sober October.
I've probably got a little bit of a head start on it this year. But yeah.
So he actually brought two non-alcoholic IPAs. This one is Best of Day Brewing Hazy IPA. And I have no idea what's in this can, but...
Me neither.
So... It says born in Northern California, so it's a non-alcoholic, I assume a West Coast IPA, if it's a Northern California.
I mean, yeah. Thanks for having me on. I'll say that, but I'll make the joke that it's certainly a West Coast IPA in its origin if it's from California.
Right,
whether
right.
the style is actually that or not, I guess we'll find out.
Well, you know what? Let's jump on in.
Cool.
And see what we're doing.
I like what it says on the back of the can here. I was I've not tried this yet. Bought this from Killjoy in East Nashville, which is like the NA store. But it says brewed for doers, surfers, climbers, early risers, freedivers, chefs, gardeners, dancers, oyster farmers, dreamers, painters, builders, mothers, fathers, runners, hikers, walkers, makers, ranchers, nurses, woodworkers, teachers, skiers, bikers, doctors, hot air ballooners. You could cut this shorter. Entrepreneurs, clowns, bakers, tree huggers, and it just goes on and on. But I like the ends with poets, lifeguard. I was reading that at this, like, just sitting here, and I'm like, I'm a lot of those things, not all of them, but that's great.
Well, then you should enjoy the beer. I'm none of those things, but I hope
you're a doer. I'm sure
okay. I'll go with that. I'm a doer, so hopefully I'll enjoy the beer as well. But right out of the gate, this beer has a sea foam head on it. It is hazy. It's kind of a dark gold in color.
Should we cheers? Can we reach?
Well, yeah. Let's get an aroma first. Okay. Just get a sniff, see what we think.
I mean, it smells like an IPA to me. Is what I'll say right off the top.
I'm getting a kind of a cereal malt, kind of a grainy cereal malt. I'm getting a lot of tropical fruit off this. So I'm kind of hoping, based on the aroma, I hope I get exactly what this, well, I hope the flavor is exactly the aroma on this beer, because that'll be nice. This isn't a very hoppy beer, or at least aroma-wise.
Am I allowed to taste it? Or?
Let's...
Cheers.
All right, cheers.
Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir.
Definitely citrusy to me.
I'm getting a lot of the cereal notes up front.
Sort of beer adjacent to me. Like it, I mean, I guess there's no alcohol in it, so it's certainly the brewing process must be a little different, where it's like, it doesn't have like as much. It's pleasant. I don't mind. I'm not mad at it. It tastes good.
No. It's different.
I guess you're definitely more zoned in on the smells and the comparisons, where I feel like I tend to stick to like my down the middle IPA pilsners things, and I'm just kind of beer flavored beer. Like I'll have things I like better or worse than other, but you have so much more language for describing the textures and
Yeah,
scents and everything.
it it's definitely this beer flavor, at least for me, really follows the nose. The cereal malt is up front, and to me, it goes all the way through. I'm not getting a great deal of the tropical fruit.
Yeah. I feel like I could pound 10 of these and barely feel it at all. Walk home.
Well,
That's
it's a long walk home for me, but I could definitely knock 10 of these down without question. But all in all, it's not a bad beer. It is not a West Coast IPA by any stretch. It does not resemble the hoppy West Coast IPA. The tropical fruit flavor is very subtle.
yeah,
But it's not
I'll agree
bad.
with that.
It kind of, at least for me, leans a little more kind of American Pilsner
I would agree with that too,
over
actually.
a hazy IPA.
Yeah, there's a little. I mean, it's just lighter. I mean, even reading the can, I'm like 53 calories is like, it's like a light. There's no alcohol. I guess that's really the. It's pleasant. I'm
But-
like, if I was at a bar, which I guess I would rather drink one of these than a Diet Coke. I'll give it.
Oh, no doubt.
I'll give
No
that the. If I was at a bar and trying to avoid actually drinking, it's not bad.
Well, I enjoy the beer. It is not,
Your favorite?
well, it's not a hazy IPA. It really, really leans more Pilsner. Had they said this is an American Pilsner over a hazy IPA, I would be more impressed with this beer.
Fair enough.
But it's not really the hazy I was looking for, but overall, it's not a bad beer.
Okay. Well,
All right.
nice to hear you say that.
Well, I enjoy the beer, and I'm going to continue to enjoy the beer as we talk about what's new with you.
I've really been holed up in the studio, and it's been great. It's been, I think last time I was on, I was talking about starting a record with my band, and so far we've managed to block off one day of the week where basically all four of us are there. If someone has a prior engagement, like it's not like you're getting penitent, but more or less once a week, been in the studio with the whole band. Outside of that, been working on my record. Like I'll take it home. I'll take the sessions files home. I'll do editing. I'll try ideas. I'm always sitting at the piano, sitting with the guitar, trying to like finish the writing, which it sounds funny to be recording a record as I'm missing a verse here. I'm like, oh, this bridge I should cut to 2 measures out and it will like feel better. I think this is it's producing for a few other artists, and then right now I'm coming off of, I don't know if I talked about this last time, I run live sound on Broadway as like my day job. It's my night job. But usually 3 nights a week I'm downtown mixing, which I don't know if that's come up with the production. But yeah, it feels really good just to be very actively creating. I think last time I was on, we were all like, we delayed our studio time due to sicknesses and injuries, and
Right.
it was a little bit more down. And today it's like, all right, was working on the stuff yesterday, going to be working on the stuff tomorrow, and just happy to be on and get to talk some about it a little. Yeah.
Well, I really last time wanted to talk about the production aspect.
Sure.
Because so far I haven't had a lot of producers, engineers, people like that on. So what mostly, as you know, it's been just artists, people who write, who sing, who play instruments. But as far as production, engineering, stuff like that, they lean on somebody else for all
Gotcha.
that. And I would like to talk to, the engineers, the producers, the other
Sure.
people when it comes to music, but you seem to fit all the
Toe the
check.
lines. I definitely started as a engineer and producer. Maybe I was writing a little bit then, but it was not a good musician. I was not. All of my friends were better guitar players than me or better singers than me, and I guess I just got luckier. It really clicked where one of my high school physics teachers was like got permission to teach an elective on like audio recording. I was just like, this makes so much sense. I love music. A lot of my friends are really good musicians. I play a little guitar, but I kind of suck. So if I can occupy this spot, I still get to be around it, and I still get to hang out with these people. And like, it's almost like I'm part of the band, but like just one step. But I'm still in the room, and I'm still like getting to do it. And it got really exciting. And it kind of just clicked. And I was like, the recording made more sense to me initially than even like playing guitar did. Like it was more natural for me to learn recording.
So would you call yourself a producer more than anything else? Like if I walked up to you on the street and said, "Hi, my name's Chris Schrum. I'm a podcaster."
Sure.
Would you introduce yourself as a producer, or would you introduce yourself as, a singer, musician?
Yeah, it depends on the context. If I'm at like a party with family, I often say I'm a musician in Nashville. But if someone asks, "What do you do?" I say I'm a producer and audio engineer. That's like per dollar, audio engineering pays my rent. Per hour, I probably spend more time producing than anything else. And then like deep down, I really just want to be a songwriter and artist. But I love producing. That's like, because it encapsulates, to me, producer is filling the blank spots of, okay, I'm in the room with a really good singer, but maybe they can't play an instrument. So like I got to fill that role. Or like sometimes I'm weighing in on lyrics. Sometimes I'm not touching at all. Sometimes I'm like, oh, this chord could be better. A lot of the times I'm just setting up the mics and hitting record. Like if it's already really good, like it's what is this project or this person trying to accomplish, and then trying to fill the gaps of the things they don't know how to do themselves. And some of those things I know how to do, but I think more and more I'm realizing to be a good producer is leaning on a network of people who are good. If knowing what I'm good at, knowing what I'm not good at, and knowing people who are good at the things I'm not good at, and when to bring them in. So yeah, I guess long story, yes, I do. By the numbers, I've probably produced, I've lost count, over 50, maybe over 100 songs for other people, and probably have done about 15 or 20 of my own. So that's on only 4 of those I think are any good.
Oh, I'm sure more than 4. But I heard you say what they want as far as an artist. And I've often thought about, what it must be like to be in the studio and have an artist come in, maybe somebody you don't know, and they're just, like you say, hit record and they just go. And to you, it's kind of like, or do you sit back and just kind of say, what are they trying to convey to the listener, and how can I bring that out?
Yeah.
Or do you sit down and say, okay, before we get started, what are you looking for in this song? What is the feeling you want the consumer to feel when they hear this song?
So a little bit of both. I think more lately I'll try to have, ideally, someone, if they're a guitar player, pianist or whatever, just no mics or whatever, just play me your song. Sometimes they'll record a demo on their iPhone, and then I'll pretty quickly form an opinion of it. I hopefully like it. Hopefully it moves me. This is like a lot of times it's, as I do this more and more, I'm trying to weed through stuff. And just because it doesn't move me, it doesn't mean it's not good, but it means that I'm probably not a good producer for it if there's not an element in it that already moves me. But I listen, I form an opinion on it pretty quickly. I try to keep a loose idea of what I hear for it. I think as I do this more and more, I'm like, try not to get too specific of like, oh, violin needs to do this at this measure, but more of like, oh, I could hear these other instruments, or like that shift going from the verse to the chorus was really interesting and we want to emphasize that. Or maybe there's a moment where I'm like, oh, that part didn't change as well as it should have when the artist was playing it unproduced. So maybe there's something in production we can do to spice up a boring moment or emphasize an already good moment. So I kind of paint a loose picture in my head of that. Then I'll kind of ask the artist what they think about it, and I hope what they say agrees with what's already in my head. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So if an artist comes in and they go ahead and schedule time to work with you, and you hear the song that they play, and you're just kind of like, I just don't feel it, and it's not striking a chord with you. Do you let them know, hey, I'm not the one for you, or do you kind of say, you know
Sometimes.
what, let me step back and kind of come back around to this and maybe listen again since I've heard the whole thing? And
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me personally, I'm sure other people would have different answers. I guess there's kind of two ways I could go about it, which is usually I won't agree to produce a song that isn't moving to me in some way. So hopefully that's before, like, we'll book before there's like paid studio time on the books. Like, we'll just hang out, play some music back and forth, make sure the vibe is good. If something does not especially move me, I'll either say, hey, you might want to find someone else for it. Or maybe a rare case, maybe a third of the time, if the artist has a really strong vision for it, I'll kind of say, hey, maybe you're the producer for this. I'm happy to engineer for you. I've done the technical side so long where I'm going to remove my opinion from it. Instead of taking percent points and doing a flat rate for the song, I'm renting a studio space. I'm happy to just rent you space hourly, set up mics, and just kind of basically recognize I'm no longer taking points on this. This is your song. I'm just doing a audio engineering service, which I guess Steve Albini, who just passed away, he recorded Nirvana's third album, among other things. He was solely that role. And maybe I've been watching a lot of interviews with him and realizing there's definitely a place for just being a technician and not asserting my opinion into it as little as I can sometimes.
Well, do you feel sometimes that as an artist, and do you feel like you bring a song into the studio as an artist and say, this is what I want, and this is how we're going to play it. This is, so on and so forth. And then once you lay the song down, the producer comes back and says, well, I think we need to do this, this, and this. And as an artist, maybe you kind of feel like, well, wait a minute, you're taking my song and making it your song. And then now as a producer, have you ever kind of felt like, oh, maybe I'm making their song my song and I'm taking...
Oh, yeah. I've never been in that situation as an artist particularly. I think the few times I've worked with outside producers, it's always been very collaborative. And maybe there's disagreements as we go. I've definitely heard of that happening to people where the demo is good and then they get signed to a record label or whatever and they're put in the room and they want to change it. And I fear myself doing that to other people's works. Like, I often don't like hearing if I told someone to change a lyric and they do, and then I hear it back and it doesn't feel natural to me, like I'll second guess my own inputs to someone's work much more than what they brought me. Because if it's what they brought me, I'm like, this is their art, it's their name, face on the cover. Maybe it doesn't agree with me, but at least it's coming from them. Whereas if I add it, I do sometimes fear that it's like they wouldn't have done that without me there. And sometimes, I mean, very rarely I'll be like really happy with that choice. But there's definitely been on the other side listening back where I'm like, maybe I made them change that too much. And I think as I do more stuff, it's definitely something to keep in mind, where it's kind of in the room as you're working on it, gauging the reaction from the artist or even everyone in the room. Like if there's a session guitar player, and is everyone really happy with this, or are they just going along with it because I said it was an idea? When I try to always phrase things as here's something to try, and not this is the right way to do it, because I think we can tell when something collectively feels right after we hear it. I think before we try the idea, it's really hard to know that when it's hypothetical.
Well, as a producer, what is your biggest fear when you go into the studio and it's 3, 2, 1, go? What might keep you up at night?
Timing. I mean, that's the day in, day out one, as someone who doesn't have an outset, like I'm engineering all the records I'm producing right now, is that whoever is responsible for playing the instruments cannot play to a metronome or to the drums, and it feels sloppy. And then in this sort of digital era, I'm tasked with fixing a bad performance and making it sound better. That's like the most concrete, just like not fun part of the job for me, which isn't really even, that's not even art in the sense. It's just, that's me being a technician, and that being in a room where I'm like, I can see the idea here. They weren't able to execute it live. I'm now, whether I'm self-imposing that as the role of the arbiter of nudging things forward and backwards so they're in time. Yeah, I don't know if there's a fear other than that. I guess the only other times I've had like negative experiences has been when there's been a lot of pressure on a record, maybe. Like, without naming names, like the first thing we did well. Second thing, they're like, that did well, people are going to see this. Whereas the first one, there was no expectations for people seeing it or not.
Yeah.
And then it's like, we got to follow it up with something at least as good. And just sort of thinking about like that expectation has maybe put pressure on sessions where it's like, we didn't figure it out in that day, or something wasn't feeling great in that day. And then it's like a negative spiral. That happened to me once or twice early in my producing for other people, where it's like, first thing we did well, is like, you can gauge well, going from not having anyone listen to your music to having a few thousand people listen to your music. But then you go to do the second one, you're like, a few thousand people are going to hear this. What is the expectation? And I think as a young producer, I've been like, I got to really step it up. And that pressure, I think, has not actually been good, and it's better to just be like, are we happy with this as we're working on it?
Well, in saying that, I've heard many artists' first album, and I've really gotten into some of it, or some of their album. And when I say that, I mean every single song.
Yeah.
I was like, I really like everything. The guitar, their vocals, everything about this. And I'm really pumped for the next album that comes out. And in an interview with that artist, they're like, we should be possibly releasing something, in this month of this year. So I'm really looking forward to it. And then when the second album drops or third album drops, wherever, and it's like, I hear the artist and it's similar writing, but what is all? What
Can you
is
name an
going
example?
on?
I'm just
To me,
curious.
well, honestly, I think John Mayer.
Yeah.
He,
Okay.
at least, I wouldn't say his first popular album. I don't know how many he's had total,
Yeah.
but it seemed like it was a lot less. And that's just my take on it. A lot less produced.
Sure.
Where the next album came out seemed like there was a whole lot going on in every song.
Yeah.
Where the first album seemed, I'm not going to say acoustic, but it seemed a lot more pure to me.
Sure.
And that honestly is when I was kind of like, you know what? If this is the direction you're going,
Didn't like it as much.
I'm gonna have to walk away from it because I don't know if you can produce this exact same sound on stage. And if you and that's with me in music, that's my biggest thing. An artist coming in with an album and they're just firing on all cylinders. And then it's like, okay, you got to go on the road to support this album.
Yeah.
How are you going to do it? Because there is a lot going on in this song.
I love that part. Or that's as me as artist role. That's one of my favorite things is the art of deciding arrangement live versus studio. I think there's 2 or 3 songs you may really enjoy on our next record, which are pretty much exactly how we do them live. And then there's 5 or 6 that are wildly different. But it's always been fun for me to try to, and sometimes it doesn't work. And I'm very intentional about picking my live set list, where if I'm like, that song had too much happening in the recording and it just actually doesn't carry the same emotion when it's not that,
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, I'm just not going to do that one live. It was meant just for the record. But others, it's really fun for me to take, I guess, plug my own music a little, but I have a song called Black Dress, which is on the COVID EP. It's actually also on, I had a college thing called Sophomore EP, which was like really young Allan. Like it was maybe my first solo recordings of songs that I had written, and it's not very good. I listen back and I'm like, I see what I was trying to do, but I didn't have the skill to execute it properly. But there was a song called Black Dress, and then over COVID I did like a synthesizer version of the same song and actually liked that arrangement better. And then when we play it live, it sounds like everyone thinks every drummer I use always thinks it sounds like Zombie by the Cranberries, but it's drum machines on the record. But then they're like, live it becomes this rock song, which is very different from the album. But I guess to me, I hope it still carries the same emotional core, and I'm not trying to replicate what's there. I'm trying to do something different.
Well, as long as you stay in the same vein with the song, I'm okay with just a banger on the album, but when the song's done live, maybe it's stripped down to only acoustic. Maybe it's only the singer and one acoustic guitar, or the singer and a keyboard, or maybe, just very limited, but it still sounds very similar. Yes, there are instruments missing, but it doesn't take away from the song.
Like the emotional core still carries.
Where you have some songs, it's just there's so much going on. And in my head, I'll take that song and I'll try to kind of pinpoint certain things. And then I've been able to, again, this is just for me, I've listened to indie artists who it seems like maybe this album, they had a completely different producer, and this producer is just big.
Yeah.
Everything they do is big.
Sure.
Big. And it just kind of seems like maybe this artist doesn't fit that producer because
I mean, more isn't always better. I think that a really, really good producer knows when to mute stuff out. I watch a lot of, my YouTube algorithm gets a lot of like videos and things on this, and I saw one with Jack Antonoff today, who produced Lana Del Rey and Taylor Swift and all these pop stars, and he worked on the new Sabrina Carpenter record, a few tracks, and there's one, and he plays this like violin symphony, and then he's like, yeah, we did it, and it only fit in 10 seconds of the song, and the rest of it I just muted. And I was like, wow, that to like take all that time to record. And I'm like, that's why he's getting hired for all these big records, or he's actually like at the top of his game. Or I don't know, like those Rick Rubin, Johnny Cash songs. I think that's like a famous, in the producer world or whatever, that's a famous pairing where Johnny Cash had been kind of off the scene and Rick Rubin kind of revitalized his career. Those most famous songs are just Johnny Cash and a guitar, and it's not, Rick Rubin isn't adding anything. He's just there saying, this is the best version of this, and anything we can add actually would make it worse and not better. And I think that takes a certain level of maturity as a producer and as an artist, just to be like, know when there's too much and when to scale it back, and that like just hanging ribbons on something doesn't make it prettier. I controversial opinion, I don't care for sprinkles on my ice cream. Like, it's just like, I don't,
Oh yeah.
it's
yeah.
like, some people do, but it's like, to me, I'm like, if the ice cream is good, like, you don't need to add this. And some, but the nice thing about working digitally is it's like, oh, we can try this, and then maybe we'll just mute it out, or like even not digital, like trying. Most records I've done the last few years will try almost 3 times as many things as will make the final record. And then it's much easier to add than subtract, actually, once you gain like a baseline competency on a keyboard. Like, you can just add parts all day, even though you can make it sound like whatever. But then to be discerning and go back through and actually say, hey, we don't need this organ here, we don't need 3 guitars, we just need 1 guitar, like, that's actually much harder. And I think most records that hit, the White Stripes, one of my favorite bands ever, is just so reduced. It's like, you take the song and you take everything that's not needed for the song away, and it's just right there.
Well, I think, and they had to grow on me. I was not a fan straight out of the gate.
Sure.
I
know people don't like his voice or whatever. It's a little abrasive.
Well, it wasn't his voice. It was just the songs in general. Mm-hmm. But the more I listened to them, and the more, like you said, they were just reduced down to exactly what it takes to get the song across. Mm-hmm. And then it seemed unique for me. I was like, this song could be so big, but it's not. And it still delivers the emotion. It still delivers everything. So the more I listened to it, and the more I took that approach to the music, the more I enjoyed it. And the more I'm looking forward to the next song. And the next song's going to be a little bit different, but it's still the same. It's not just big boom and so many instruments, just, a room full of folks playing. It's just, this is what we need to get the point across, and we're good at these instruments, so we're going to do a little something in here that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And that's what I enjoy about his music and his guitar style of music. It's not just so much going on.
Their live record, I love. It's what I think maybe what like really got me in as like a big fan of the band. Because it's just 2 of them, but it sounds so. I mean, some of them sounds really bad, like, but it sounds like good bad. Like he does a cover of Jolene by Dolly Parton or whatever, and he's just screaming at the top of his lungs, but it sounds so raw and desperate, and it's abrasive in a way, but then it's like, I guess also just impressive to me, and it's unique that I think I've always gravitated towards stuff that feels a little different than everything. Like I grew up headphones on, just like first my dad's music and then like just swapping MP3s back and forth with friends. Like as soon as like I was just like, there was nothing to do in my hometown. And that was like, for whatever reason, I just loved listening to music more than anything else. So anything that felt like down the middle, I was like, oh, I've heard this before. Whereas I feel like a lot of people, like the massive songs, like, I don't know, Don't Stop Believing by Journey comes to mind. I don't like this song at all. I think it's really boring and it's trite and it doesn't move me at all. But I mix at a bar and people sing along to it and they love it and they're hearing it as being the actual uplifting message. And for me, I'm just like, this is pop music. I've heard it before. It doesn't appeal to me. Yeah, I like the summary is I've always liked stuff that feels a little different. And I think a lot of people who listen to a lot of music like that, and a lot of people who listen to less music like stuff more down the middle. But I guess whatever, it hit me at the right age as a teenager or whatever, and just like the right album came on at the right age, and I was just like, I love the White Stripes. This is my favorite band, and it was right after they broke up I discovered them. But then
Well, of course, isn't that the way it goes?
but he released a solo record which I enjoy, and then like I don't know, him and the Black Keys being in Nashville were maybe a part of the reason where I wanted to move here, like realizing I'm like, oh, Nashville's music city. Sure, it's country music, but then I'm like, two of my favorite like garage rock, blues rock bands have like relocated to Nashville too. Like, there's got to be something else happening going on here.
Well, what if Jack White and or the Black Keys came to you and said, we want you to produce our next album?
I think it would be that would be in a way a dream. I think it would probably be pretty different approaches working with either of them based on their most recent efforts. Like Jack is known to be pretty hands-on. I'd be like happy to set up mics, help mix, like give some input, but I'd probably be a little more laid back with his stuff just because he's also produced for Loretta Lynn, and he's someone actually who's, like you were saying in the intro, for me, does actually check all the boxes where he's an artist and a writer, but he also is a producer himself. And he doesn't necessarily engineer every record he produces himself, but I'm sure he could. The thing he did over COVID was very impressive to me. And if some of those tracks, he was credited with every instrument and self-recorded it, and they sounded amazing. The Black Keys, I would probably want to... I'm personally very partial to their first few records, and I would probably... I don't know exactly, but I would... If they were... And a lot of it's about it is getting the artist buy-in to making everyone involved thinking that they're doing something cool and special and unique. And if sometimes I'll get this harebrained idea of like, we should record the piano in the lobby of the studio that's 80 years old and all the keys are beat up, because I think that'll be more interesting than just doing this on a perfectly sounding piano.
Yeah.
And then I have to like pitch it in a way that everyone gets excited about that, and the artist doesn't be like, oh, because if you don't, they'll be like, well, that's silly, like it won't sound as good as doing it professionally. But then for me, I'm like, this will be more unique. We did that on a Natasha Blaine song. It was like one of my first outside production here that did really well. We had amazing jazz piano player, and we did it in the studio, and he was kind of ripping through really fast. And then I'm like, we went to this old beat up piano, and he had to play a lot slower and be very intentional on his note choices. And there was like AC noise in the background, and it just sounded so cool to me.
Yeah.
And I was glad that everyone else, the Josh and Natasha, also thought it sounded cool, where it was like we were all on the same airplane takeoff together, as soon as, hopefully it's not the artist, but as soon as someone is like a little bit of like a wet blanket on something like that, where like the spark is like, it's like, oh, let's try a synthesizer here, let's do something. And negativity is like corrosive in a creative environment, because as soon as you start, you're trying to make magic, or like it's like it's a good song is like a magic trick to me, where you're trying to like stick the land, or like the thing the gymnastics people do in the Olympics, like blows my mind. I could never do that. But sometimes it feels like in the studio we're trying to put together something that sometimes it's really straight ahead, but assuming we're all reaching for it and going for it, we're trying to, like Simone Biles, stick the balance bar. And is like, as soon as someone is like, oh, maybe this won't work, like if you're on the balance beam like that, you can't have like a shred of doubt in your mind. Like you can't second guess any of your emotions. And I think that can be, without making what I'm doing sound more important than it is, negativity is really bad in the studio environment, I guess is the point. I don't even remember the original question, but the Black Key. Oh, trying to convince the Black Keys that it would be cool to go to an abandoned garage and record something as a 2-piece with gritty guitars the way their first few albums were done. That would be kind of fun for me.
Well, if they came to you and said, we're just going to make this as easy as possible. Here's our music. Mm-hmm. This is what we're going to play it the way we're going to play it. Mm-hmm. We're going to hand it to you and say, make an album. Okay. And they're going to kind of give you, not necessarily free range, but they're going to give you plenty of input. You know, you have this well-known band that kind of has a unique sound, and they got all this talent, you know, and they're going to come to you and say, here, you do this. Would you really lean in and say, I'm pumped about this? Or would you say, ooh, hang on just a second, and maybe I guess what I'm asking is, would I take the job? Well, not necessarily would you take the job, but would you kind of be like, there's a whole lot.
I would be excited about that, because I feel like both of those artists are late career artists, where their early work was very recognized and impactful to people and emotionally meaningful to a lot of people. And they've already had a long career, and they've already made records that have not been as well received. So I feel like they're over the hump of they've already had people be like, this is different than the old stuff. This isn't as good as the old stuff. It would be much harder for me to take a young artist's second or third album than something like that, because they've already tried and succeeded, and they've already tried and failed. So there's almost pressure. There's more pressure on me than on them. And in a way, I'm just like, I would like to, I would be psyched. I'd be like, we can have fun with this. You have a large back catalog, which actually was very meaningful to me in my youth. And I want to try to make something that captures the spark of what your favorite records were to me, but feel just a little different, or maybe reflect where you are, Dan Arbeck, Patrick Carney, Jack White, as a 40-something-year-old instead of a 20-something-year-old. And you're going to have something different you want to say about life. And hopefully I can help with the sonics to provide a platform for that has the spark of what I loved about your early records. So I would be really happy with that job. Okay. If they're listening, you can email me.
Right. Well,
let's make a record in a garage with a tape machine, Black McKees.
Well, do you think someone who has the experience, do you think it is easier to communicate with them about things that you may or may not like?
Yeah, assuming they weren't an ass. I don't know. It depends if they were a dick or not. Is like, if they were giving them, I hope that they would be nice people and they would have more of the technical knowledge and more. Yeah. Sorry, is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah, I guess based on the fact that they've made multiple albums, and not necessarily just them, but just artists in general. You know, like you said, producing someone's second or third album, either they produced one and it hit, or they produced one and it missed, and maybe they're kind of looking to you and saying, can you help me, either maintain the ride I'm on, or can you help me figure out why I'm not, why I'm not hitting, why it sounds good to me, it sounds good to my friends, but the consumers are just not, do you feel like maybe it's added pressure when somebody comes to you who's, I'm not going to say a failed artist, but they haven't hit yet.
Yes and no.
They have the potential, and you see the potential, but you just,
I think
they,
in a weird way, maybe this isn't the right way to answer this question, but it'd be more exciting for me to work with someone who like has flopped a couple of times, but had, as long as there's something in there I could see, because then we get to do something different. We're say, hey, we know that thing hasn't worked. Let's try something new, which is exciting to me. I like, whereas if you go with someone and if we're talking about famous bands like the Strokes or whatever, where it's, people love the first two Strokes albums, but every Strokes album sounds the same, kind of, more or less. They're great. Like, don't get me wrong. They're amazing songwriters, but to me, it would be more boring to do something like that, because then I'm like, we're forced to compare it to a past thing that was successful and copy that. Unless the hope is always that the artist is going to be in a place where they want, for me, to venture out into new territory and try to say, hey, we did that before, it did well. Can we go deeper? Can we do something that's more impactful, or maybe deals with a different emotional set or something, as opposed to just making the same thing over and over again, is a lot less exciting to me, because then it's just, you're just copying something as opposed to creating something like original and creative, which is what I get excited about.
Well, do you think that maybe an artist coming in who has either self-produced or had someone else produce an album, and you hear it and you're like, man, you got this one song, it did nothing, but I think I can take that song and make something out of this song. I can look at this song in a different light and do something with this. Would you tell an artist, hey, let me take this song, and, is that a conversation you could sit down and easily have with an artist?
I mean, it depends on the artist, but I think a lot of times I'm working with people who aren't massively commercially successful, and they're kind of open to whatever, as long as, I mean, I'm always down to try, like, and that's happened before with, not exactly that, but Justin Lewis, who I'm wearing some of his early merch, he had a song produced, it was his first song, by someone else, and I rather liked the recording. Like, to me, it got the point of it across, but then we were working on a record, and he wanted to include that song on the record we were working on, so we kind of reworked it from the ground up. And he had a lot of ideas too, and it was him actually saying that. And I'm trying to think of, weirdly, I hear songs in my own cat, like I've produced for other people, that I would love to redo. I'm trying to think of, I think the Black Keys did oh no, maybe it was blues cover, but they've recut stuff. It doesn't happen a lot, I think, but I think there's a time and place for it. And I think there's, maybe as young artists or new producers or whatever, there's sort of a learning curve where it maybe takes, like people say, it's like the 10,000 hours to mastery or something like that. For me, I feel like it's only I've been making music since I was 15, 16. What would have that been? Like 2012. Like I'm going on like a little over 10 years of making music. And I think it's only the last few that it's actually been something that I'm like relatively proud of. Like it took me as a producer, artist, or whatever intersection you want to call those, producer and artist. I think it took me 7-8 years to figure out how to make something that sounded almost as good as records that I liked growing up. And then even now, I still think it requires, I hope it gets a little easier as I go, but I feel like this Finites record that I guess it's probably going to be marked as produced by Allan Fine and the Finites. Like Brian and Brian are just such good instrumental arrangers, and Hyde has like this like this really unique like aesthetic lens that I think it's like the Venn diagram of Hyde's music taste and my music taste is what I want the band to sound like. So having them to lean on as, I guess I'm driving things in terms of like, I think these are the songs that I want to do, and like let's all meet at this time and place in this studio, and like I'm often the one setting up the mics. But I mean Brian Cahill set up, we recorded a lot of drums at his place, and he's really good at that. But it's exciting. Sorry, this is the first one where it's like I've spent all that time figuring out what to do on a technical level, and I can listen back to this record I made in 2016 and be like, oh, there's some good ideas there, but I cringe when I hear it because I didn't know what I was doing. And now it's like I kind of know what I'm doing, and then I've spent all this time working on albums for other people, singles, albums, whatever, and learned all this technical knowledge and bought all these microphones and figured out how to plug them in, and bought all the software and figured out how to plug that in, and bought a tape machine. And that was still kind of figuring that out. That's been a learning curve, but it probably is only going to get used on half the record, but it's more than figured out how to play guitar. Like, I mean, I knew how to play guitar well enough. I'm not even going to say excellent, but like having seemingly the ability to execute the ideas I had. And that's why like so many about half the album was written 4 or 5 years ago, and about half was written in like the last year or two. Just because it didn't feel right to do, like I couldn't get the songs to sound the way I wanted them to do, and they just sat. And then we'd play them live, and it felt good live, but then it was like, this doesn't feel right. And I think if I had had a really good outside producer help me with stuff, it probably would have happened a lot sooner. But that just never came up. Weirdly, Brian Cahill, who's drummer of the Finites, is my favorite outside producer I've ever worked with on my music. Yeah, I don't remember. You asked about re-recording stuff. Certainly a time and place.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm ready for that second beer. So.
Yeah, hopefully it's not too warm. I do like the can design.
All right. What is this? Ted Seeger's.
Does it say unleaded? Regal Brew?
That's unleaded funny. Regal Brew.
That must be a joke. I'm hopefully also true, but
that tells me nothing about this beer.
Is it even a beer? It doesn't even claim to be a beer, so it's a malt beverage.
Oh, this could be interesting. Let's go ahead and jump into this.
Apparently, Dax Shepard recently plugged this, the lady at the store said. And I'm only vaguely aware of who he is, but I guess he has a following.
All right, well, Mr. Seegers, and I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. Let's okay, that's interesting. I know.
That's not I hope it tastes better, but the smell is not as appealing as the last one to me on
no, it's not
a more subjective judgment. Am I allowed to taste? Did I rush that? I have a thought right away.
Go ahead.
Heineken, but not as good. It's not bad, actually. I don't. It's drinkable, but to me it resembles like a Heineken.
That I am sorry. That
You're not a fan.
no, not at all.
Do you want to crack another one just to drink, or you're gonna stomach it? What
No,
happens?
no. I mean, it's not unbearable by any stretch. It's just I don't know what I was looking for in this beer. The head dissipated very quickly. The beer is very, very light. I mean, almost a straw color. There's very little gold in there.
How do you feel about light, like in general, like Bud Light or Heineken, or like do you like those beers generally, or not so much?
I like beer in general.
Sure.
Certain styles I will gravitate to more than others. Certain times a year I'll gravitate towards
I'm the same.
certain styles as well. Light beer, I can drink light beer.
For me, it's for boats or sports games.
Yeah, and well, I grew up on light beer because there really back then there wasn't near the choices. So, the Bud Lights, Coors, things like that was pretty much all you could get your hands on. So of course I enjoyed it, but as I matured and more beer or different styles were available, your palate changes. So I gravitate more towards a little bit heavier beer, but a well done light beer is definitely something I enjoy.
I've been into Pilsners lately just for that reason, because it's like threads the line of still being, especially in the summer. And I think especially to shout out Smith and Lentz Brewing in East Nashville has like just amazing, like what they've done with Pilsners is like kind of a world beyond, like for me, like I don't know why, I'm just like pretty quickly was like IPAs. That's my preferred thing. And then to explore the variety of flavor within the Pilsner a little bit after, I'm like, oh, this is lighter and crisper, but there's still, you can do different things with it. That was kind of, as far as the craft beer world goes, that's about as deep as I'll go. I will say I really like Smith and Lentz's Pilsners.
Well, a well-produced Pilsner is definitely something that I will enjoy during the summer. Probably a few more than I should, simply because it does check the boxes for flavor. Both the hoppiness, the maltiness, they don't battle each other, or, one doesn't really overwhelm the other one, and it falls the way it should on my palate. When I find those Pilsners, I definitely keep them around, especially in the warmer weather. There's days I'll get home from work and I'll have hazy IPAs in the fridge. I have some Pilsners in the fridge, and I'm looking at them. I'm like, you know what? I don't want all that. I just want something clean, simple, but still a good beer. So once I pop that Pilsner, I'll stay with them for a couple of days because so
that was good.
I enjoy light beer.
I don't know. It's funny talking about that. I've been sober for longer than just October, probably 5-6 weeks now. Maybe partially this album cycle, partially just working late nights, and I'll probably stay. If you ask me right now, I'm probably said through November and December to, like, I give myself till the end of the year deadline loosely on this record, and there's a very good chance I would like talking about Pilsners and IPAs and stuff. Now I'm like, oh, I miss that. I do love, and I think there's just an amazing the sharedness of something like that is beautiful, where it's like you can be with I mean, even a show like this where it's like we're in a collective experience, and this hoppy drink is part of it. But I don't know. I think in a weird way, I will say I like this first one better, but like
Yeah, yeah.
we're still having a shared experience with a hoppy drink. I hope that if it's not, this is fine.
It's not. It's just different.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's what I'm gonna say I don't like about it.
It almost feels like flat.
It really is flat.
I wonder if I did it. This came in and out of my car a couple of times today. Maybe to give Ted Seeger's full benefit of the doubt, but maybe we just don't like it.
Well,
are we allowed to say bad things about beers?
Yeah, I mean, I want this show to be 100% honesty across the board. Would I drink this beer again? No, I would not. It does not check any boxes. I don't know if maybe, obviously, if he's going to put his name and his picture on the label, he likes it.
Is Ted a real person?
I have no idea.
This could, I could, I don't know if you guys can see this. I could definitely see this being apparently, what is it? Einstein bagels, not real people, like the Einstein brothers bagel. Like some of those like corporate faces are not actual people. They're character. Popeye's, well, I guess Popeye is sort of a cartoon character, but there's no like, is there a real Ted Seeger? If so,
well, I tell you, looking at whoever this is on the label, be it Ted or whoever, honestly, at a glance, I think Ted should have probably tried cigars. He kind of has that look, like he's more of a cigar guy than a beer guy. And to be honest with you, based on whatever came out of that can, he probably should try something else.
Sober beers for sober people. It's like I mean, I don't know, not to shit talk it anymore, but it definitely, you could see someone who doesn't drink beer regularly designing a beer like that, I guess. It's is what it is.
Yeah, well, I poured it in the glass, so
I like the can design.
Yeah, I do like. It's kind of subtle. It's not just jumping out, but I do enjoy the gold, the red, and the kind of pale white. But it is what it is. You're gonna win some, you're gonna lose some, and again, beer and music go together.
Yeah.
Some beer I'm gonna like, some I'm not. Some music I'm gonna like, some I'm not.
The Primus Greatest Hits record, which I've never listened to. I'm like not a huge fan of their music, but their Greatest Hits album is called They Can't All Be Zingers, which I thought was like hilarious to me that they would name their Greatest Hits album They Can't All Be Zingers. I mean, they're also a very funny band. Like their fans chant Primus sucks is like their like catchphrase, like the same way like Bruce Springsteen fans would shout like Bruce. They say like theirs is like Primus sucks is like their catchphrase. I guess their self-deprecating sense of humor, but that phrase "they can't all be zingers" is I think apt.
Well, it's true. It is definitely true. Not everyone's gonna love every song out there. It is absolutely impossible. But one thing that I'm really curious about, and maybe, people who are thinking about maybe pursuing a career in music production.
Yeah.
How long do you devote to, let's say, just one song, not a whole album, but hour-wise, if you had to say...
I can tell you right now, my standard production contract agreement says that it's a flat rate up to 40 hours, and very often we're pushing that much time, usually around 30 to 40 hours a track for something fully produced. Definitely have spent a lot longer on some songs. very rarely, like, assuming it's something you, if it's like a live acoustic guitar and vocal, you could, but saying something like fully produced record, yeah, 30 to 40 hours usually, sometimes more.
Well, to be a successful producer, what kind of person do you have to be? Do you have to be someone who is very meticulous and can devote endless hours to a single project?
Probably. I don't know if I'm if I don't even know if I'm a successful producer, but it depends on what metric you measure. I guess I've produced records for people that they've been happy with, I guess. And in that metric, I guess I can answer this, but I do want to caveat that I'm not a wildly commercially successful producer, and you might want to go listen to Mutt Lange or Jack Antonoff or someone's answer to the same question. But I think it's a sense of knowing what you like about a song and being able to articulate and chase that, which I guess to me, I think boils down mainly to passion, where it's, I can hear, despite all the mud or the recording quality or the imperfections, I can find a spark or a light in the middle of this rough idea, what a diamond in the rough or whatever.
Right.
And just being able to chase that initial, you're like, that one part of this made me feel something and I related to it or I liked it or there was something, and I'm just going to try to keep honing and polishing that till it's all just the positive feeling. And sometimes it's adding, sometimes it's subtracting. And I think definitely to be a good audio engineer, like being relatively meticulous probably helps a lot. But I think above all, it's kind of just like a passion to just say, I've heard this song 50 times and you know what, let's hear it another 50 until it's where I want it to be, you know? Obsessiveness maybe is even more important than meticulousness in a way.
Okay, well, you say you're not a successful producer. If someone's coming to you, paying you to produce their album, maybe it's not the top of the mountain.
Yeah, no,
for you.
I'm not in. Yeah, I see what you're saying. There's a ways to go. I'd like to go in my career still, but I guess if you asked me when I was in high school or first starting out, I never thought I would be doing this for a living at all. So in that sense, I guess, yeah, I'm very thankful to anyone who's ever hired me for a record, or even in the first early days, not hired me, given me zero money, but percentage points to work on your music, trusted me to help with your art.
Yeah. Well, for someone who is wanting to pursue this as a career, what route should they take? Where should they start? Because there's probably a lot of people out there who say, you know what, I could do that. But maybe they've never been exposed to anything other than, somebody just sitting in the middle of some small town in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, I can answer this much more concretely of how I did it. And then I guess my general advice would be start wherever you can with whatever you can, whether that's this artist named Steve Lacy produced songs on his iPhone GarageBand that got the attention of Kendrick Lamar, and he made a beat for Kendrick Lamar on his iPhone. So like use whatever you can and start. And if it's, I guess, like more concretely, I can say that for me, what was my path that I think parts of it another person would be able to learn from and replicate were I had minimal gear you'd probably need would be a microphone and a computer, and some way to get the microphone into the computer, and then a MIDI keyboard might be helpful. So you could get all that for a few $100s potentially. Being able to relatively play an instrument is definitely helpful, and there's a lot of YouTube tutorials on guitar, but like baseline music theory knowledge is helpful but not required. For me, it was, I landed back in Nashville. I'd been working on this stuff casually for years, and I think that's like the first piece of advice I'd give is whatever day job or live with your parents or whatever, don't expect to pay your rent anytime soon from even now. Like I work live sound, and that pays my rent, which is not glamorous. I'm not working on art. I'm mixing bar bands. It's fun. I feel like I'm good at it, and I enjoy it for that sense. But don't quit your day job. Get yourself a basic microphone setup, and then probably record your own songs. Or I had a friend of mine who would like remake beats to Jay-Z songs. Like, you don't even need a microphone to do that. But assuming you're going to produce an artist, which is what I do, that's the world I come from. I just went to open mic nights, and then I listened to people's songs. And anytime someone had a song that I liked, I would say, yo, that's great. Have you recorded that yet? And either they'd say yes, and I'd be like, sick. I'll check it out. Like, look forward to hearing it. If they said they hadn't recorded it yet, I would say, do you want to? And then only to people I like. Like I met this guy, Patrick Breyer, at this open mic night. I thought he was amazing singer. Like really bluesy, kind of rough around the edge, but just like his stuff moved me. He was just playing it with an acoustic guitar. I liked it. He hadn't recorded it. And then we did 4 songs in my bedroom, and then I got a little wacky with them, and he liked it. And I listen back now and I'm like, okay, I could have done a lot of things better. And like, I think parts of the songs maybe could have been shorter or things like that, but it was more or less. And then Alex Randall Davis, an artist who I produced their full-length record a couple of years ago. I don't think they still live in Nashville. Met at an open mic night. Monica Guardado met at an open, who's EP. She just released a song called Rings of Saturn like last week. Love her record. We've been working together a long time. Her music she's really a beautiful melody writer, and like it's so fun to work on her stuff. But I met her at an open mic night. And then, I mean, there's stuff like in Nashville, there's like New Faces Night. I think to do it for a living professionally, it's much easier to be somewhere like Nashville. It doesn't have to be Nashville, but where you have the ability to go see live music in a low-key environment with people who are not famous, and then talk to them at the bar right afterwards. I think that's the number one piece of advice I would give, is find music that is not already blown up, not famous, has no expectations, that you enjoy, and then see if you can work on that music. And then start out, just say, I'll split the master percentage with you, not going to charge you any money because I'm trying to get a portfolio together. Then once you feel like you're very busy and you have done stuff that sounds good, start asking for a little bit of money or whatever. I've never even, if my rent was paid, I would produce records for free. Like I love doing it. It's kind of out of necessity and time and capitalism. That's just like the system we're in, where it ends up being now. I'm renting a studio space and I have to pay for that. And like more than that is like the rent and like just, but I did it for I think when I was in college, I was like, we did this record, SG Maniac, No Sleep. It's my college roommate. We did a full-length album our senior year, and it got like on campus. It was well received. Like our friends were like, "This is cool. No one else we know is making music that sounds good. Like you guys are amazing." And then like I was like, "Oh, I'll just move back to." Everyone thinks that the music we're making is amazing. This should be easy. I just moved back to Nashville, and then I was like, working at a restaurant and depressed and not producing music I cared about, and then like got in a couple demo sessions with people and like did not get hired for the record, got like ghosted by a writer who I thought was good because like what I did within the 2-hour session of trying didn't click. And then worked at a restaurant for a couple years, and then I ended up working at an office for a couple years, and then but all the while, like nights and weekends were working on tracks and buying more. You don't need a lot of microphones, but I was always trying to, now I sometimes will buy something because I think it's fun, but at the beginning it was always like, I want my drums to be in stereo. I only have one of this overhead mic. I need to buy another of the same mic so I can mic drums in stereo. And then it was like, it was always buying equipment out of necessity for, this is something I'm not getting the sound I think I should be getting, so I'm going to buy equipment for that reason, as opposed to just, I didn't start out with the most expensive stuff. I started out with bare bones stuff, and then I was like, my audio interface is kind of crackly. I'm going to spend more money getting a nicer audio interface. Okay, I have one nice microphone. I have a Shure KSM32. Recorded everything on that for 2 years. And then I was like, okay, I need to get a kick drum microphone. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to get a second KSM32 so I can do drums in stereo. Because I did a record for this band, and we went to the studio and we did it. And then they came back and they're like, we want this to be 5 BPM faster. And then I was like, okay, before we spend more money on studio time, like, let's demo this I was living in an attic bedroom at a time. So it was like a big, long bedroom. And I was like, all right, come to my place. Like, let's demo this in my place before we go spend more money on the studio. I saw them at New Faces Night also, just back to my prior point of find people who are accessible, who is like, that was time where alcohol, not non-alcoholic beer, actually did help me. I got pissed drunk at New Faces Night and then went and talked to this band, and it was like, I'm a new producer in town. Like, I liked you guys' stuff. Like, we should work together. Like, I just got drunk and told a band that, and they'd agreed to meet with me, and then we did a record together, and but we demoed drums in my bedroom, and I had 2 mics or whatever, and we did it, and then they're like, great, well, that's it, that's the song. And we didn't go back to the studio, and I was like, what? How is that we didn't go back to the studio? The drums are in mono, and they just didn't care. They're like, the parts are right, which I think was maybe I think there's a lot of lessons you could draw from that, where it's just like, but it was basically, then I was like, well, I guess I could do drums in my bedroom because this band thought it was good enough for them, but they were mono. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to buy another one of the same mic that I already have so that I can have stereo drums. I worked in a microphone company for a couple years too. And they unfortunately are going through hard times, laid me off and let me keep a number of their mics that I had as sort of like a severance, which ended up being kind of the start of my equipment library. So that didn't hurt things either. But yeah, I guess start wherever you can is my loose advice. Don't depend on it to pay your rent until it takes over your life, and just start making things. Like, I don't know, how did you start this podcast? What was the like the early days, the impetus behind that, if you haven't?
Well, I talk to artists, musicians. I talk to all kinds of people in the industry at a couple of different bars that I go to. And again, like you say, alcohol was involved.
Yeah.
You know, I hear people talking, and I'm a friendly guy, so, you know, I'll interject into a conversation if I feel that I can do so without being rude. And I got to talking to different people about music, just anything that had to do with music. And I noticed that people, artists, musicians, really enjoy talking about their craft, and especially if it's over a couple of beers in a laid back environment.
We love getting asked about it because we, or at least for me, I think about this all day. But to have someone else who's interested in it is like, it's like, of course I'll go on your podcast however, have me back whenever. It's for yeah.
Well, I enjoy learning about the industry, learning about music, period. And I can sit and listen to people talk about it for hours. And I started thinking, I was like, well, there's got to be a platform out there where I could do 2 beers with the band.
Right.
And I think as far as time-wise, 2 beers should be about a decent podcast,
right.
As far as time goes.
That's smart.
And I want to talk to people who are not mainstream because those were the people I was talking to when I came up with this idea. And I have interviewed people. I've interviewed full bands. I've interviewed single artists sitting in a park with a simple little recorder that I bought used off of Amazon. And, I've recorded people on my phone, and that was awful. It just did not, it was awful. I enjoyed the conversation. Seemingly, they enjoyed the conversation, but as far as playback, it was awful. I felt bad.
I guess.
But, like you, I've grown from recording. I've recorded in living room, in a car, outside, various places, most of which cannot be found based on, audio difficulties, whatever. But I've decided that it's time to move forward. And I'm renting this space that we're in. I've upgraded to different recorders. I have different mics, other than the 2 we're talking on.
It was all learned out of, I guess the point I was getting at is you started, you made mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
You thought about what those mistakes were, and you iterated and you made things better and better. Because you're producing this show is not drastically different than me producing a solo artist or a band. It's like we're agreeing to show up at a location, we're setting up microphones, and we're trying to make a product that appeals to the outside world. Like, that's the job in a nutshell. So like start. I do want to asterisk that. I had one other thought while you were talking, which was I realized that maybe one other piece of it, for me, it was very helpful. I was banging my head against the wall. I was between freshman and sophomore year of college. I had a friend of mine from my hometown and myself made this little, I don't remember if it's 4 songs or 5 songs. I'm from Rehoboth, Massachusetts. We called the project Rehoboth, like Boston or whatever. But it was like funny to us because it was like a tiny, small town. So we're like, we're going to call this Rehoboth. And there are no other bands in Rehoboth. So we're going to be, and we set up, my dad's office had like an extra room that he was letting us use after hours. And we set up like the drum set and stuff in there and just kind of recorded those. But it was banging my head against the wall trying to make things sound right. Like it just didn't, it was amateur. It was exactly that. It was like me I'd watch YouTube videos on some stuff. I had read some gear reviews and I had like the basic kit, and Donovan, the other person in the band, was an okay musician, and I was not as good, but like it was us playing everything. He played most of the instruments, I did most of the recording, but I think he must have not played guitar because I think I ended up playing the guitar, and he played piano, and maybe he played some of the bass on the record, but I guess I was the one of us who knew how to play some guitar. But anyways, I banged my head against it. We spent all summer making these 4 or 5 songs, and sounded like crap, but it was like I learned so much about, okay, you could set up the mic there, or like this doesn't sound right, or like this is going through the process to the best of my ability and pushing the edge of results I was able to get on my own. The following year, I had a song I had written, which is called Montreal. You can probably find it online under Allan Fine, Montreal. It might be on something called a sophomore EP, which had cool album art. The songs, the newer stuff I'm doing is definitely, I'm never plugging this, but my friend Hayes Helpsper had gone through like Blackbird Academy audio school.
Yes.
And his music sounded so good to me. Like he was recording mostly his own stuff, but I was like, and in hindsight, I'm like, he was a really good songwriter and he was a really good singer and he was a notch above me as a guitar player. Like he was a very good musician. And I think that was a big part of it. But he had gone to Blackbird audio school and he had like just a degree, and I like basically bullied him. I like kind of tricked him in my head to producing one of my songs where I was like, dude, you gotta come by the studio, and like I've got this really good drummer in, and like you gotta play piano on this song. He was a really good piano player. Like I think he always struck me as he was a pretty good guitarist, but a really good piano player. I was like, you gotta play piano on this song. I got this really good drummer, and like just gotta come by the studio tonight. And then afterwards I was like, you should produce this song. Your music sounds so much better. Like your music sounds like what I want my music to sound like. We kind of went back and forth, but the whole time I was over his shoulder being like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? What are you doing? Why are you doing? I was trying not to be annoying. I was probably kind of annoying. Sorry, Hayes, if you've ever listened to this, but that showed me the differences between having me already banging my head against the wall for 2-3 years trying to self-record and having it not sound the way I want, and then going into the studio and I'm like, oh, he uses a lot of compression and he'll just stack effects until it sounds right, and he'll use multiple reverbs. And there was a moment where it was like a ukulele on the song and it was a little out of time, and he nudged it on time, and that was like a light bulb moment for me where it was like, it wasn't so much that he fixed something he perceived. It sounded better when it wasn't like, oh, this is over gridded, it was over time corrected. He just did a little mouse stroke and he moved this ukulele strum like a little bit forward or backward in time. And then he played it back and I'm like, that sounds better than it did a minute ago. And it kind of just clicked in my head that everything he's doing is because he hears something and then he's making an adjustment to try to make the song sound better than it did a minute ago, whether he's adding an effect to something or moving a ukulele around. And then to his credit, he was really good. And he like even suggested changing some chords and stuff, which we didn't go that deep, but it just like for me particularly, it was like seeing the amount of compression and reverb he used, not being afraid to time incorrect some stuff, but it just like, it leveled me. We spent maybe a few days a week on this song, but that was like my biggest stair step forward in skills that I had, because I was able to shadow someone who knew what they were doing. So I guess maybe if you're in a small town and you're hearing this, you might want to like try it yourself, spend $300, buy the cheapest gear you can, try to make a song yourself, probably do that 5-10 times, and then like go hire someone to record a song for you, or like shadow someone who knows what they're doing, and that will kind of like unlock more. YouTube's really good these days too, but I think if you can, that was a big breakthrough for me, was having someone who knew what they were doing produce one of my songs.
It's interesting that you say that, because I noticed earlier you said you were listening back to some songs you had done early.
Yeah.
And you were just picking them apart. You were like, oh, I don't like that.
Yeah.
As you've grown or spent more time with production and learned, I guess everyone matures in their art, but do you think that same person that you're talking to saying buy the cheapest gear, doing it, do you think that if they apply themselves long enough, that they'll find their own mistakes? Though, everybody's
Yeah.
gonna hit that wall.
Yeah,
believe.
I think there's there's an ebb and flow to it where it's like you need to be passionate enough about something to put in a lot of time to something, and be open to not being good at something right away. Like I don't know, it's the same if you're trying to like be a baseball player or whatever. Like you can't just start out and serve 100 miles an hour. Like you got to just put in the hours on it, and then like there's probably, I don't know the exact answer, and it's probably different for everyone, a right ratio of like practice and coaching. And I think I don't really know. Like, I guess I was very passionate about it. I don't think I was ever especially skilled. Like, I had an aptitude for computers more than music, and a lot of this job is on the computer now. And then I just wanted to do it. And then eventually, like, I found some other people who were making stuff I thought was cool and really tried to hang out with them. It's hard. I don't know. I think it would be hard in a vacuum. I don't think I would have kept doing it. And I think a big part of that too was I had, however small it was, like I was never famous on the internet, but a group of other artists, whether they were self-recording or just songwriters or whatever, who were around to share songs with back and forth, which was like this tiny Vanderbilt University college scene. And there was like this one songwriting class there, and everyone took the same songwriting class. And it was like, there was the community studio at the university. I ended up running my junior and senior there. It's called Vanderbilt Recording Studio. And there was just like this bubble. It was like 15 or 20 people total, but really like probably 4 or 5 who I was friends with, where it was, if you made something, you could not just you could play it for people. And I don't think it would have this was pre-Spotify, and I don't think or maybe it was Spotify was just taking off, but it wasn't what it is now.
Yeah.
And I think if it was just online, I probably would have quit a lot sooner, because none of my stuff did click online for a long time. Even now, like you can always be like, I want to go higher, I want to do more streams than the last one, more streams than the last one. But I think more important than that for me starting out was having a very small community of people who were honestly just my friends more than anything else, where it's like, oh, I wrote a song, I have 3 people I can play it for.
All right, guys, we're going to take a quick intermission, and we'll be right back.
All right, so while they're at intermission, I figured I'd come in here and introduce myself. My name is Harkos, and I not only edited this podcast, but I have my own podcast called Music Making Sense Podcast, where it's all about music marketing, branding, and how to have success, real success, as an independent artist. Every single week, I drop a brand new episode giving deep insights and tips and tricks on how to grow your fan base in a real, sustainable way as an independent artist, without having to sign to any label where they try to make you conform, without having to worry about trying to get on these scam playlists or deal with bots online. I'm talking about real sustainable growth by finding real fans who rock with you and your music and what you're about. And that's what I bring every single week in an official podcast episode over on Music Making Sense Podcast. And then I also have a Wednesday night live stream where I go live and hang out with every single one of y'all, playing your music, as well as a bunch of other independent artists, music from all genres. So if you are an artist and you want to get some more information on how to grow your fan base in a real sustainable way, or you just want to have your music played and sit back and hang out with some other people who like listening to great music from a lot of independent artists who are hardworking and who love the craft, make sure you check out Music Making Sense Podcast. That's available on all streaming platforms. Wherever you want to listen to a podcast or watch it, you can check it out over at musicmakingsensepod.com for all the links and details. The link is down in the description of this video, but it's also Music Making Sense, CENTS, as in money, pod.com, Music Making Sense Podcast on every single platform. Anyway, let's go ahead and get back to this episode because I think they're about ready to come in right now. So I'm going to get out of here.
Yeah, back at it.
All right.
It's beer number 2.
Right. So I guess we're about an hour 35. So, let's get at least 30 more minutes,
Okay.
which
Sure.
seems to not be a problem.
The first hour and a half flew by for me. So.
Right. Well, I've enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Hey, anytime you want to come back. I mean, I have so many questions about production and engineering.
All right, fire. What do you got?
Well, I mean, we could sit down and easily do 2 or 3 more interviews just based off, questions I already have. But I kind of want to let you talk about what you want. And then maybe if you had time later on, it could be more of a Q&A type interview.
I don't have that much. I guess Finite's record 2024. I got to figure out how to promote stuff. Have an email list. There's nothing like I need to plug. It's not coming out for what I'm happy if you have a question or something interesting to talk about. I don't need to promote anything right now that's like pressing. I guess I've got a Spotify playlist of my works. I try to keep updated. If you're trying to make a record, I'm kind of booked right now because I'm like I said, I'm giving myself till January to work on my own album. Like, if you have something that's really fucking cool, like, holler at me, and I'll probably, because it's pretty much down to like 2 days a week on client work right now, and like I'm trying to do more just engineering, hourly work, pay the bills while I'm producing, like putting all my artistic brain into my own album at the moment. But that being said, I definitely have some client projects going that I think are sounding cool and will sound cool when they come out. It's more of just like, I think 2 years ago when I was doing more client production and less of the band, it was like, oh yeah, bring me your songs and let's record them. And now I'm more of like, bring me your really good songs and let's record them.
Right.
I don't know, the time, as you have less time, try to optimize it more. But yeah, I have a website. Check that out. I've got an email list for my own art. I've got an Instagram. I've got a Spotify playlist, but I don't know. More than that, just now I'm like trying to be a part of the community and am thankful to be in a place where I do get to record my band, and I guess check out the Pasture Recording Studio is where we're at right now. It's just been nice. Tomorrow night, Thursdays, like once a week, has just been like band time, which has been, it feels so funny to be like saying that, but that was a big step for me to just a lot time for my own record, and take all the knowledge and skills we've been talking about production. But yeah, if you have any questions on producing or music or anything that you think I might have insight into, I don't know what else to talk about right now. So,
Wow. As far as production goes, that I'm not going to say that's the backbone of a song, but wouldn't you say that has a great deal to do with
our perception of it? Like,
yeah. Like, okay, maybe this isn't a fair question, but where do you think the Rolling Stones would be without production, without a good producer sitting down and saying, this is what we're going to do?
They never, so I've read Glenn John's autobiography, who was the audio engineer of Rolling Stones. He went on to produce Steve Miller and the Eagles and, oh my God, so many just of the 70s. He produced the Who's biggest records. I guess that's like a big heavy hitter. He co-produced, engineered, I guess maybe got production credit in hindsight, the Let It Be album by the Beatles. But anyways, he has an autobiography where he talks mostly a lot more about his work than his life. And he stopped working for the Stones because they refused to credit him as a producer and pay him royalty points, where he was only ever credited as engineer. But he says that Mick and Keith had pretty clear ideas on the early records, and they were kind of self-driving it in a way. I think he did a really good job. Speaking of Glenn John's perspective of, I don't know, like a song like "Give Me Shelter" is like hits me. Like that's, I mean, the Stones have so many good songs, but like to me, that's the one that, like, when I think about production and like the recording of it maybe being beyond any particular live version, or like there's a song, right, which you can think of as someone playing you a guitar on Living Room, a song, or even a song like that's covered by someone else, like All Along the Watchtower by Bob Dylan is covered by Jimi Hendrix, and there are two versions of it. So there's like the song, which is like the chords, the melody, the amount of time allotted to each lyric, the vocal phrasing are like the song, and then the recording of it, the production. But a song like "Give Me Shelter" is just like those backing vocals, and there's a freaking guiro, like Latin instrument percussion in it. And I can't say, I don't know who, I could be wrong here, but I feel like it was actually like Keith Richards and Mick Jagger who were allegedly like driving those creative decisions. But then Glenn Johns, who probably should have been credited as a producer on those records, but they didn't want to give him the money or whatever, was there to actually capture it. And I think you can, I don't know. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like everyone involved was like firing on like top of their, I mean, Mick Jagger's voice is so weird, but it's like, it wouldn't have been the same if it wasn't him singing. Like, and it's like even the background vocalist they got in, like, and I guess there was a pretty robust London studio scene, and they probably, I don't know if it was the record label or who was the person who brought in those people who weren't in the live band, but yeah, everyone, it's just magic. Like, it's captured, it's a record, but it's amazing. Like, that's what I was saying at the beginning. It's like a magic trick or like a high beam dance, and like they stuck it with some of their stuff. I would probably like that. Sorry, thinking of the Stones still. That what's the really long record they have? That's like a lot more raw sounding. Oh, this is embarrassing. You can edit this part out.
Right off the top of my head, I cannot tell you.
Exile on Main Street. Just cut straight to that part where I said Exile, or leave it in. It'll be funny. But I'm not as familiar with that period, but it's pretty rough around the edges, and I would imagine all of their records would sound like that. But then in the Glenn Johns autobiography, he talks about working on how they would just record everything because they were already successful at that point. They had money. They weren't worried about running out, buying more magnetic tape or whatever. They were like set up in whatever studio or whatever basement. They would just get drunk or high or whatever it is. They would just come, they would play music as a band, and they would record it all. And then the record was really them having like way more material and just cutting out all the drunken bullshit and being like, these are the takes of the band where the band sound, these are the best songs. Like they maybe had 40 or 50 songs, and they're like, we're going to do our best, like 15 or 20. So I don't know, maybe whoever made that track list is like deserves was like actually the producer on that record in a sense, because otherwise it was just like the Stones playing a lot of music while under various substances, and then just someone sorting through it and being like, hey, we can package these songs as an album. That's Exile on Main Street. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, who do you think, who are your idols in the production world?
Sure.
And that My follow-up question for that is, do you think someone who is thinking about pursuing production, would you tell them to follow or listen to or maybe kind of do a deep dive into these people? Or is producing an album something that is unique to a certain genre? Or do you think, I'm sorry, maybe it's too many questions, but do you think a good producer can produce in different genres?
Yeah, I understand that. But probably some people can't. I think the role a producer plays changes a lot depending on what genre you're in. And I think more recently, there's this guy named Kenny Beats, and he started out as like an EDM guy, and then he's like has a funny YouTube presence or whatever, and then he was making hip hop records for like actually some pretty like Vince Staples, who's one of my favorite rappers right now. Like Kenny Beats his name is Kenny Beats, like he's making beats, which I think in the hip hop EDM world, that's what a producer's thought of when like we're talking more in like the rock world or the Nashville singer-songwriter world, where which is kind of pop, if I'm being honest, or sometimes country, but like it's whatever it is.
It's changed.
Yeah.
And changing still.
Yeah, but in that sense, like a producer is more classical 60s, 70s, like recording things or helping the band decide how it should be recorded. But anyways, this dude, Kenny Beats, he's now producing this band Idols. They're this punk band out of Britain. So like, I guess there is someone like him where he's able to, a lot of the skill set does transfer, where it's like you have a head for about how long section should last. You have a mind for like what the dynamics of a piece should be, what the arrangement should be. And I think by him essentially arranging these EDM beats or hip hop songs, like he actually was able to produce like punk music pretty successfully. Rick Rubin is like number one, comes to mind of like super famous. Like I read his book, known for genre hopping. He started out producing hip hop artists, Beastie Boys, Run DMC, and then produced heavy metal, and then produced that Johnny Cash record. So yeah, I think you can. But I think also if you're just like a really great beat maker in the hip hop world and you have no interest in working with bands, that's fine. Or like vice versa. Like Tony Viscotti produced a lot of the David Bowie albums. I think he's amazing and deserves a lot of credit. I don't know if he could sit down in Ableton and make a beat. And I think that's fine. So I think some people can hop genres. I've dabbled a little. I would like to work with another rapper or something coming up. That would be kind of fun for me, being in the singer-songwriter world for so long. Like to get tasks with something else. I think as I was in later years of college, it was really inspiring for me being in sessions with a few hip-hop producers of it's not like the same rules of genre where I was so worried about guitar amps and things like that, and they're like, that's not what matters. What matters is if it sounds cool. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. They'd just put crazy effects on stuff, or like run samples backwards, or like just like this kind of freedom from thinking something has to be done in a technically correct way was kind of a breakthrough. It was with this guy named Lack Honey. His name's Ali Lakhani. And he's a rapper, and then he's making his own beats, and he just started like doing crazy. Like I was just happened to be in a few sessions with him and like just hanging out, and it was like, oh my God, he's putting that reverb on that thing. Like I would never, that's not a technically correct effects chain, but he was just kind of like following what sounded cool to him and clicking buttons, and it was great. Other idols, I said Rick Rubin, the dude from LCD Sound System, James Murphy, I think is really cool. Jack Antonoff is super famous right now. I think I just happened to watch a video of him breaking down a song earlier today. I like some of his music a lot. I don't know if he's like one of my favorites. A lot of bands I really like produced their own stuff too. Like I love like super unpolished like DIY indie like Neutral Milk Hotel or the first Shins album or the Car Seat Headrest records where they just sound like crap. Like that to me is like as enjoyable as something that's really well produced is something where I'm like, this band is clearly not well produced, but the songs are so good that it like it still works. Yeah, those are, I mean, definitely like, oh, you know, the guy who, that Seal song Crazy, I'm blanking on his name, but that guy also produced Owner of a Lonely Heart by Yes. And he was like, apparently the first dude, I'm blanking on his name, to like decide that we should use like a metronome or a click track on something and try to make something like just so exacting. And I think that was like a step between the 70s, 60s, 70s sounds and modern sound. To me, like the biggest difference is like the use of the click track is so pervasive in modern music, for better or worse. Like I use it all the time, so I'm guilty. It's not a bad thing on any one song. It's more of just that it's become the normal that something is done to a click. And I think he was like the dude who kind of pioneered that in a way, or at least in like the pop rock world. I could be, yeah, so much good music. I don't know. Like there's just, I appreciate anything that sounds good. Like, I don't know. It's the best producer could be some kid in a laptop in a bedroom now. J. Paul. That stuff's wild. I think as I was younger, I was just like more into bands sounding like bands. And then like as I got more into producing, I was like more into stuff that was like out there or exacting or using the Beatles. I don't know who's George Martin is on the, I guess the producer on those records. Those records are great. That's so funny just to end it on. Yeah, the Beatles records. Those are.
Yeah, I think the world would agree with the Beatles having some pretty decent music.
Yeah, but I guess in a sense it was them and the Beach Boys who were like went from, hey, we're have a studio where it's more or less the band playing the music live, to them being like, we're gonna treat the production of this song as something different. Like the Beatles stopped touring at the end of their career because it was back to what we were saying at the beginning, where they're just doing too much crazy stuff in the studio, and there's no way we can play this live. We're just gonna stop touring and be a studio band. And you have songs like Strawberry Fields Forever, that are just like, there's a whole orchestra there and there's backwards tape loops and it's just stuff that you could never do live. And I think for me starting out, I was drawn to, as I got like whatever rudimentary computer software and was not a great live player, was kind of drawn to maybe that record making as an art form, where it's like you can make something that someone else can listen to 60 years later after you die, and it still is emotionally moving, as opposed to just like playing your song in a room for whoever's in the room to hear it, which I think now is all that's emotionally moving too, and that's also needed. But that's, yeah, different side of the same coin. Is that the right way of saying that?
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so I know I asked you once before.
Yeah.
But I think this question was more band related at the time. But what is the top of the mountain for you as far as being a producer?
That's interesting. I don't know. Just for me, it's for being a producer, it's more just waking up and getting to do it. I would love to eventually have my own build my own studio space from the ground. I love the place I'm working out of now. It's great. They cut me a great deal on the rent. It's a beautiful space. Go work at the pasture, even if I'm not your engineer. But I would love to basically own my own room where I could leave all my stuff set up. There was a lot of natural light, and it was just like, and then it's more just sustainability. That's what it is for me, where it's just, I just love doing this and just getting to the point where there's not a financial gun to the back of my head of making rent every month for this. And I get to work on music that I want to work on, which I think could be back in the traditional music business. I would have answered this like, I would love to have my own label or something like that, where I get to record music that I'm passionate about and have it have an outlet to make money. Whereas I don't feel like it's sustainable for artists or bands to pay me a lot of money to work on their material and then not be making any money off of those songs. Like, that's, sure, you'll get an album maybe if you have a day job and it's just your passion project, but that doesn't feel like it's as sustainable. Anyone who's made music for more than 2 years in Nashville is probably very passionate about it for some level. And there's reasons to continue making music that have nothing to do with money. And in a sense, like, I think someone with a day job probably has a more interesting perspective than, like, I don't know, John Mayer or so, like a famous person. Like, if you work at a bank, I almost want to hear your songs more than I want to hear a famous person's songs, just because you have like a normal life that's more relatable. So it's not, but I guess the artistic freedom to wake up, go to the studio, work on music I'm excited about, and then have an outlet where people are hearing it would, I guess, be the top of the mountain for that. It's just to keep doing it. Like in a goal perspective, it's like make more money and have a nicer studio and that. But I think on like an actual level, it's just like to get to have my life organized in a way where I just get to keep doing this. That's all I want.
Get to keep making music without the interference of a 9-to-5.
Yeah. I mean, even I would take a 9-to-5. Like, I'm not, like, I work nights on Broadway now. Like, I've thought recently. I think it's more than that, is just being excited about the songs and it's like not having to feel like I have to say yes to songs for money, where it's like actually get to work on stuff that I'm artistically excited about. And if that's a 9-to-5, like, it would be nice if it was just like, I'm Rick Rubin. I live in this nice mansion with all natural light. The studio is right there, and we have artists come in. They spend 2-3 weeks. We're all in a Zen environment, and we're playing our instruments and making something beautiful that impacts people. Like, I guess that's the goal, but I'm fine if that doesn't happen. Like, it's more than that. It's just like being in a place where I can allot the time and not, because I think to do this well, like, I can't be stressed about, or maybe for me it's like a reason I like doing this is if I am stressed about something else, if an artist comes in to me with a song, I'm like, whatever I'm stressed about is not as important as like providing a good job for this music on this day, which is why I love it. So I'm like, just being able to be like, but you have to be in a place where you can't, like, you can, if you're starving, you can't make good music. If you're behind on rent and the debt collector is coming to break your knees, you can't make good music. Like, it's, I've been watching The Sopranos a lot lately. Right. But
I see where that reference came.
Yeah. But it's just like, yeah, just, I don't know. I'm thankful that I do get to make records as much as I can, and just like keep doing that. And I guess to hope that the other parts of life that are not as convenient get minimized so that I can keep making records I care about. And I don't know, it's fun playing with the live band. And I guess my ideal balance would be like every few months do a show with my band, maybe a mini tour here and there, and then it's like in between work on records for anyone who wants to.
Okay. All right. And on that note, anyone who wants to get in touch with you as far as doing production work, engineering work, anything like that.
I probably should plug my website for this because then I can link everything else from there. It's a little room studio dot. No, it's a little room dot studio. It's not a littleroomstudio.com. It's www.alittleroom.studio. I'm also on Instagram as Finite Allan, but trying to get an email list cooking, which I'll link on my website, I'd imagine. So a littleroom.studio has all my contact information.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else you would like to say here, or is that just...
No, it was great having me. I don't know if, depending on when this launches, you could go out on either one of my songs or the song by Monica, or her artist name is Monica Moment now, called Rings of Saturn, just came out, and I was really proud. That was done in my old studio, which was the attic bedroom, but it was been shelved for a while, and that just came out. You can go out on that, or you can cut it before then. But thanks for having me, Chris.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you being here, and hopefully we can get together soon and have a couple more real beers.
Yeah. I'll probably go till I'm imagining in my head I'm going to be sober till January when I finish this album. I think it's like the late nights of like, I just watch so many people piss drunk like late at night on Broadway, like working down there. And then I'm up so late, and then I realized like it would be my day off Wednesday, and I would have like a couple glasses of wine or a couple beers, and then I'd wake up tired the next day, and I was like, oh, it's just like with my sleep schedule right now, I'm like, oh, this just for a little bit, I'm just gonna cut this out so that I can be like that much more clear-headed when I'm like trying to finish the projects I'm working on for now. But probably around January, I'll start cracking some cold ones again. I do the chat about Pilsners and IPA in the middle. I'm like, I do really like beer, and I'm thankful. I've known a lot of people who are have addiction problems, and I think I try to stay sober about a month a year, give or take, just to see what my brain does, because I've had a lot of close friends in my life who have been on kind of both sides of that, and the ones who are doing well, like completely sober for one reason or another, and I think their lives have become better from that because they're like just too drunk too often is not, you know.
Well, you won't be clear-headed.
Yeah.
You know, and I've noticed if I take 2 or 3 days off in a row that I'm a little more clear-headed in everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just... But I think as far as you being a producer, and especially if you're working on somebody else's, you know, dream.
Yeah, I mean, I would never... I don't usually use... I'm usually the sober person in this, dude. Like, I'm often will be around artists getting drunk or high or whatever, and I'll be like the one sober person in the room running the computer is like my role more often. But that's, I guess, your question about the Stones earlier. That was if they were all getting fucked up, if Glenn Johns wasn't the sober dude in the back of the room setting up the tape machine or whatever, then those records might not exist the way they did. So like someone has to do it, you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, I want people who are interested in producing, engineering, things like that. And we could do a whole separate podcast on engineering.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I'm sure are people who only want to do production.
Yeah.
And maybe they're the ones that...
It's hard. I mean, I guess that's the other thing I didn't really say on mic earlier, or if the mic's still running, but it's like economic realities of recorded music are not amazing right now. Like, you can probably eke out a living by working really hard, but like there are much easier ways to make money. And I think sometimes always been a balance for me of wanting to make art and then wanting to pay my rent, and a production is like somewhere in between, where it's like some months I've been able to do both really well, and other months I'm like, I'm just taking this record I don't care about for the money, and because I need it. And then now, like, the live sound job like cushions my income, so it's like, okay, I'm gonna try to take recording jobs that I'm like passionate about. But it sounds downer to be like, would recommend like anyone who's interested, like, I would recommend them not do it as their primary means of making a living unless they really felt like they had to. And then if they felt like they really had to, then you just got to work hard. That's like I don't know. I'm sure there are people like there's the live sound thing here is pretty good because there's always live shows, and that's like a steady paycheck. Yeah. And like, I think it's hard to get in because there's so many like Belmont MTSU grads, and then there are less and less big budget records being recorded in studios where like, and if you are a staff engineer at like one of the big studios, you probably hold on to that forever. So there's not many like 9 to 5 openings in the industry. It's more of just like working on stuff you're really passionate about, and then hoping that someone has money to pay you for that, I guess.
Well, do you think that if your bills were paid, and you didn't have to worry about money at all, and you took only passion projects as far as production, do you think that you would focus more, or maybe, I'm not going to say work harder, because I don't think that would be fair.
There are a few artists I would reach out to who probably could not afford to pay me for a full record and say, hey, let's make a full record. I just haven't had time yet. And I hope to do, and I was making some inroads earlier, probably like December last year, January this year, of like actually starting the label and print and doing that. But it just, like, I got life, you just get busy with stuff. And like, if someone comes with me to a paid project, like, it's hard, and it's something I actually want to work on, like, I'm not going to say no to that. Whereas if it was just my stuff, like, there are probably a few artists that, and I should probably saying this, I'm like, it's funny listening back to the last podcast I was on, I was talking about all these things, and I'm like, yeah, I should do that. I agree. And it was like we're just starting to work on I think I talked a lot on the last podcast about like wanting to make a record that stands the test of time, and then like hearing that back as like we were kind of like just getting started, and then hearing myself say that, I'm like, oh, I said that on a podcast, I gotta deliver on those ideas. Right. But now it's like, okay, maybe I should mid next year, whatever, there's probably a few artists that I should just be like, all right, don't pay me, I'll take a big cut of the percent. But Spotify pays so little now, and I don't have a promotion arm like to do something proper. But I think if I don't worry about doing it properly and worry more about doing it, then there's probably a few I mean, one is like the Toy Dinosaur dudes. I'm really hoping I produced one song for them, and they're kind of trying to figure out how to optimize the release of that. But I would love to just hole up with them for a month and do their record. Like, but they're so good by themselves. Like, they don't really need me. Like I help on the mixing, the technical side or whatever, but like their music is already so interesting to listen to for me, which is why I like working with them. Cause I'm like, I like working with artists where I'm like, this sounds really cool before I'm even involved with it. My job's easy. I just gotta, but I don't know.
Well, hopefully I'll have them back before long. We've been in communication, and they got a bunch of things going, just like everybody else.
I mean, I don't
does.
know every artist that's on your walls, but the ones I do, I've never. Ray, Gears, Miss Lonely, all like amazing songwriters. I should probably. I know Ray's just releasing an EP. I thought about talking with her a while back about recording some stuff. Anyways, maybe I'm just seeing that and manifesting it right now. But I'm booked till January. But it's good. I'm excited. It's honestly been the last, maybe the post bike accident, like focused a little more on like, okay, I'm actually in a place where I get to do this. Like, let me take advantage of it.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
and that's good to hear. And
Yeah.
I'm glad things are going really well for you.
But have me on in sometime after January. I'll crack a couple beers.
Couple of real cold ones.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
All right. Well,